Hi there, it's Watchin, founder and CEO of I Choose a Ladder, and I want to welcome you to the C-Suite Cheat Code, a show where we pull the curtain back on the unwritten rules of corporate America and give you the cheat codes to reconstructing the corporate ladder. First item on our meeting agenda, salary transparency in New York. And then we head on over to Citi for a conversation with the Global Head of Operations and Fraud Prevention, Chief Client Officer at the Global Consumer Bank, Titi. And she and I talk about being your authentic self in corporate America. Then we make a quick pit stop so I can share some things that I found around the internet that made me laugh during the week. And then before we end our meeting, we will head on over to the hot seat where I will answer your career questions. Today, we'll be talking about knowing when to move on from a job and how to discuss raises with your employees. Clearly, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's get to it. So, in case you missed it, New York announced that starting April of 2022, all companies are going to be required to list their salary ranges for jobs for new positions, promotions, and transitions. And everybody freaked out. But here's the thing. New York is not the first to do it. California and also Colorado have salary transparency laws that are in place. But this is a huge deal that a state as large as New York has decided that they are also going to follow suit. So what does this mean for candidates, right? This is great news for people who are seeking jobs, because if you have no reference of what a role pays or what you should be commanding in the workplace, this publication then gives you a range to which to prepare. It also is great for employers and candidates because it's going to save you time. If you are interested in a position, as opposed to going through rounds and rounds of interviews and everybody investing time into this and then getting to the offer and realizing that what they are willing to pay is way below what you're willing to accept, now the potential employers have to go back to the drawing board to find someone else, and then you have invested all this time in a role that ultimately is not the best fit for you. But I think the most important thing about this law is that it's going to start to hold everyone accountable to close the pay gap that we currently have within corporate America, right? It's going to give you an opportunity to level the playing field. So employees who have worked for companies for a really long time and have been loyal will not be penalized for being loyal and for their loyalty, because clearly we need people who want to stay within organizations. We want to retain great talent. Ultimately, I would say don't freak out about this. It is not something that's rolled out countrywide, although the hope is that it will. We asked on Instagram of our audience, how important do they think transparency in pay is? And overwhelmingly, most of them said that it does matter and it would help in determining if a company is a great fit for them. So all in all, I say kudos to New York for following suit, and hopefully this will now start the process of getting people better aligned in the interview process before they get to that final offer stage. Next up, the internet. So you all know that I spend tons and tons of time on Instagram. I kind of feel like I'm addicted. And so every week I'm going to share one post that really took up a lot of time and sent me down the rabbit hole. And for today's post, it is titled, "What Money?" So apparently, allegedly, I don't know this to be 100% true, but it's on the internet, right? So it must be true. There was a letter that was received by a candidate from a company explaining to them why they did not extend an offer for a position. And part of the rationale was around wanting people to accept the job because of the work and not because of the money. To which the candidate replied, "What money?" And when I tell you, I died the first time that I saw this. And this is a message to everyone, right? Employers alike. Make sure that when you are, again, putting these offers out and you are listing these positions, salary transparency, people have expectations when they come into certain interviews around, what they will be paid based on the workload, based on the title, based on their experiences. And so as you go through the process, make sure you're as transparent as you can be so that when the offer is extended, there are no surprises. People feel like they're on the same page and that they are aligned in what they saw for themselves in the process. In this week's cheat code, we are learning from Titi, who is in the C-suite at Citi. I had an opportunity to talk to her for the I Choose a Ladder podcast. She is episode 77 if you want the full conversation. But in this clip, you will hear her talk about about being a Nigerian woman and how she has found her voice and how she has shown up as her authentic self in her career that spans more than 2 decades. And so get your I Choose a Ladder notebook out, a pen, and your favorite beverage, because she is about to give you the cheat code and how you can show up as yourself every day at work.
Titi, thank you so much for saying yes to being on the podcast. I've been reading about you. I am now an official member of the Titi fan club. And so really, really happy to have you with us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me, and you're way too kind. I'm excited about being on this podcast and helping reach your audience.
So the first question, I know that like myself, you are an immigrant, and wanting to know, how did you come to be aware of corporate America in the way that it is in America and know that it was something that you could potentially pursue?
Yeah, so I was very fortunate because I grew up in Ibadan, Nigeria, but I was born in Ithaca, New York. My parents were in grad school at Cornell and kind of worked in the States before moving back to Nigeria, which is where they're from. And so as a result of that, we lived in Nigeria, but visited quite often. And then most of my father's siblings were in the US doing graduate school or medical school or law school. So even though we were growing up in Nigeria, pretty close ties to the US, just from being born in New York and then having extended family here. And then with an econ undergrad, my very first job was in banking in Lagos, Nigeria. And if I looked at the founders of the bank, he was one of those new age banks, Guarantee Trust Bank. If I looked at the founders of the bank and the senior managers, they all had some level of experience in America, either from graduate education or having worked in, Chemical Bank or some of the earlier banks in the 80s. And so being in the banking sector, I think gave me a broader exposure to kind of the global banking sector. And then the typical path was, okay, it's time to get an MBA. And as you can imagine, and I think even more so today, America is still viewed as, and I think is still one of the best places to get a graduate education. And so it was researching, what were the top grad schools, doing my GMAT, which I did in Lagos, and then coming over here to work for a year actually at the Northern Trust, and then go to Kellogg.
Yeah. So let's talk about mistakes for a second. So you have a huge job, right? And you happen to be one of the few Black women at this level in this country. And so everything that you do is under a microscope, right? Everybody's going to have an opinion. It's going to be like, if I do something, my friends will talk about it. If you do something, it's in the papers, right? And so how do you think about taking risks with your career, right? Because you're still wanting to learn and all of those things. And then how do you think about making mistakes? Because I think for a lot of us, especially the younger people, we're so afraid of mistakes that sometimes it stops us from pursuing things that we made because we don't want people's opinions or whatever the case may be. So how do you think about mistakes, and has that changed as you've gotten more senior?
So I think one of the biggest mistakes is when we hold ourselves back and don't try new things. And I also recognize that it's easier now in some ways than it was when I started. But even when I started, I actually had way less to lose anyway. And I've always thought about, again, back to how I grew up and where I grew up. I've always thought about, you have these talents for a reason. Right. And your talent could be reading, it could be writing, it could be inspiring others, it could be problem solving, whatever it is. You have these talents for a reason. And we have a fixed period of time when we're in this planet able to impact others. How are we using those talents and how are we using those time? And how are we finding environments where we can fully deploy that range of talents? And if we're in places where we can't be our authentic self deploying those talents, then we probably need to make a change. And I've made several changes in my professional career for those reasons, because the need to be authentic and stand in my truth and lead with impact and values for me far outweighs any other consideration. And so when I talk to people, especially women, I try to get them to think of the opportunity cost of not leaning in more so than the chance of failure. And then talk to say, okay, but what is the worst that can happen, right? If you try this role and it doesn't work out, what is the worst that can happen? Okay, you might lose your job, but you're talented, you're educated, you'll find something else and you'll continue to thrive. And really, quite frankly, some of my biggest leadership lessons have come from mistakes or experiences that haven't gone as I thought they would. But even in those really difficult times, There have been incredible leadership lessons, and sometimes just what you won't do as a leader that one has been able to take from those.
And you talk about talents though, but so we've interviewed at this point like 100 and something Black women, executive senior. So we only talk to VP level and above. And of all those women, only 3 of them have said that they don't suffer from imposter syndrome, right? So even when we have the credentials, when we have the proof of performance and all of those things, like there's still something that makes us feel like maybe our talents are not what we thought, or somebody's going to find out. So have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome, and how do you manage that and still push through to take the risk and make those decisions when you have a voice in your head that's like, they're going to find out that I'm not as good, or whatever that case may be?
Yeah. So again, I think I don't really relate to that, but I think it's because I didn't grow up here. And I had a mom who was killing it. I have an aunt who's a MacArthur Genius Grant. You know, all my sisters, like literally, my aunt is
the pressure.
Works at University of Chicago. She's a professor of oncology at University of Chicago. She's a MacArthur Genius Grant winner. Like, that is my dad's sister. So my point is, because I was very fortunate to be born in a family of super high achievers, I haven't had a lot of the, oh, I'm not good enough, because I'm like, well, it's the same gene pool. So let's compete. But what I have had, though, in my mind is the whole rumination piece, right? Which is something that women also deal with, which is we tend to be like, if somebody says something didn't work or something, then you go over and over it, like, oh my God, this is bad, this is fatal, how could this happen? And I've had to learn to let it go, right? Like the Frozen song, I just let it go, because it's really not all about you. Things happen. Sometimes it's about you, but a lot of times it's not about you. It might be the other person, what they're going through, their own biases, their own stereotypes, their own issues. And if you let it impact you, then it can lead you into a negative spiral of either self-doubt or questioning yourself, or just focusing on your weaknesses. And so my biggest thing has been less around the imposter thing, but it's the letting it go and say, you know what, maybe it's not about me, right? Maybe they've got their own issues that they're projecting that's showing up, and I'm not going to let you take up the space in my head, right? And lead me to doubt myself. I'm just going to let it go and move along. That in particular is what I've had to really work on.
What helps you let it go?
I sometimes think about the song. And then somebody said, you know, you're ruminating like a cow. I think about a cow that just recycles the grass and chews it and chews it and chews it. And then as I've gotten older, I've been like, okay, so fine. I guess, you know, that was not a win, right? So some of it was age and maturity over time, but also self-awareness about that behavior that says that is so not productive. Like, why am I replaying this thing that went wrong 2 weeks ago in my mind over and over again? The odds that nobody else even remembers, and I'm still trying to replay what I could have done differently, right? So being self-aware about that tendency to ruminate has helped me get to, okay, Titi, it's write down your lessons, and then you need to move on.
And you talked a little bit earlier about the importance of feeling like you need to be your authentic self wherever you are. What does that mean for you?
So for me, it means environments where there's not a big normative, like everybody's supposed to show up a certain way. Because if you have environments where, oh, this is what's done and this is how it's said, by definition, that means like everybody is filtering to try to conform. So it's like sensing for, you know, strong cultures matter, but strong cultures shouldn't be about everybody similar. So I look for markers like, why are they all dressing the same, and why are they all sounding the same, and why are we saying, well, this is how we disagree, and let me give you the history lesson. Those are actually flares and warning signs that these environments may not value authenticity, because there's such a normative tendency to get everybody the same. And for me, authenticity shows up in a willingness to engage at all levels in the organization. So I'm the kind of leader where if you're telling me I can only go to certain places and only speak to certain people, and people need appointments and I need to follow a script, that doesn't work, because I want to be able to engage with all levels of my organization with an open door policy. Authenticity for me also means speaking up for people that I support and advocate for and things that are great, but also speaking truth to power about ways that we can be better in a constructive way. But in a place where I feel like my voice is wanted, not just heard, but actually wanted and solicited and heard. And environments that don't want to hear about opportunities to do better are environments where people like me will struggle, because I feel like we're here for a reason, and that part of that reason is having impact and helping make things better. And it doesn't mean we're always right, but we should get all the voices on the table.
And I think like people listening to this are going to be like, yeah, she just described corporate America, where you have to be a certain way, you have to look a certain thing. And I know for a lot of the women who listen, there's a struggle of feeling like maybe I don't belong. And I think that if people want to work in corporate, there's a place for you. And so what would you say to that young Black girl or early career woman who's saying, yeah, all the things that she says, that's been my corporate experience. Like, what would you say to her?
Yeah, I would say push back and keep looking till you find the environment, because you absolutely belong. I am almost 6 foot. My name is Titi. I didn't change my name. My accent, you hear me like she's from somewhere, right? Obviously Black woman, right? And I've been able to have over 25, years now of experience at the highest levels, all the way from, after business school, starting at McKinsey. So yes. Now, not every culture is as progressive. Not every industry is as progressive. I would actually say financial services, because more and more we think about our consumers are not homogeneous, is becoming much more progressive than maybe it was 20, 30 years ago. And there is absolutely room and interest for the full range of expression. So I've been in meetings with sisters that rock afros. We have sisters that wear dreads at the highest levels of the organization. We have Hispanic leaders who are openly, who speak in Spanish mostly, and they're welcomed at the table. We have LGBT leaders who do excellent job at all levels of the organization. And it's not just at Citi, but I would say things are changing. And there's a stronger realization that we have to create enabling environments for everyone. Our consumer bases are not homogeneous at all. And your power is actually in your authenticity. If you have to spend a lot of time trying to conform and filter yourself, you actually lose your effectiveness. So I would say continue to lean into your power. And if you're in an environment where they're telling you can't be who you are, then it's time to find a different environment.
And with that, thank you so much, Titi.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And now we head on over to the hot seat. The hot seat might be my favorite part of the show, because I get to hear from you and answer the burning questions that you have around professional development, around employee retention. And usually the questions that we get are really interesting. And so let's head on over to the hot seat. First question is an employee question. When do you know it's time to move on? I've been in my current role for 7 years and I enjoy it. My manager has made it clear to me that there are no promotional opportunities available in my current department. My company, like most, has a hierarchical structure, and I'm currently set as an hourly employee at the coordinator level. Including this role, I have over 15 years of experience in the industry. The main obstacle that I feel is holding me back is my lack of a degree. I'm currently enrolled in online classes and should be completed within the year, but I feel I don't present well on paper without it, and that has left me afraid to explore other positions within the company or externally. I suppose my question is this: does experience carry any weight these days, or will a lack of a degree leave one stagnant in their career? So first of all, great question, and I want to commend you for finding an area where you could improve and then actually taking the steps to do that. Oftentimes we are intimidated by what may seem to be a lack of something, and we stay stuck in our ways and we stay stuck where we are, but you've found something that could potentially hold you back, and you've decided that you are going to conquer that. And so again, I applaud that. But to answer your question, experience does carry weight, right? But within the corporate space, depending on the job that you want and the work that you want to do, unfortunately, a degree may be the cost of entry. It may be one of those things that you can't necessarily get around, especially with the way that work is going these days. And so I would say explore different opportunities as you continue to pursue your education, so that when you do have your degree, you've already built the relationships and you've already kind of had your eyes set on where it is that you're going. So then at that point, you've checked all the boxes, and next is just finding some place where you will feel at home. But again, for some jobs, unfortunately, a degree is the cost of entry, and it's really hard to get around that. And this next question on the hot seat is from someone who works in management. How do I manage the number of employees who will be expecting raises and promotions due to their impact on their workload during the pandemic? Realistically, I have limited budget for raises and limited headcounts for promotions, but I think everyone on my team is extremely important to the continued success of the team. And you know what? This is probably something that people managers all across the country, all across industries are dealing with, because it has been a time where we have asked our teams to do more, to be more, to show up more, and to work more. And so yes, you are going to have people who are expecting you to pay it forward as it pertains to compensation, as it pertains to recognition, as it pertains to upward mobility within your organizations. What I would hope is that the first time that you're having conversations around your limitations or your limited resources would not be at the conversations where people are expecting raises. My hope is that there's been some transparency as the year has gone on, so that people understand where you are as a department, where you are as a company, and realistically what can be done. What I will say though is that you go into those conversations with honest answers about the timeline in which you can accommodate raises, and that you can accommodate, promotions, and that you can accommodate more visibility, because there's nothing worse than going into a meeting expecting one thing, having the answer be no, and then have nothing to follow up with. And so as someone who already knows that there will be people who may be disappointed in those conversations, have a plan of what the future may look like for them if they remain with the organization, and specifically with your team. All right, y'all, we are almost at the end of our meeting, but before we go, something that I want us to get in the habit of is training our minds to think the things that we want them to think, and to be more positive and give ourselves more grace. And so every episode, I'm going to leave you with a career affirmation to get you through the week. And today's affirmation, and I'm using the I Choose a Ladder affirmations. If you don't have a deck of the affirmation cards, head on over to choosealadder.com and get a deck of it. But let's see what the message is for the weekend. All right. It is: success and wealth come easily to me. Success and wealth come easily to me. I accept that. I'm going to meditate on that. And you all know that I love to keep the conversation going. So if you want to keep talking about this episode, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at I See You Watching. And until next time, thank you for watching. Meeting adjourned.